What happens when a woman, exhausted, heartbroken, and nearly unrecognizable to herself, finally stops chasing the ghost of a man who never really existed? Picture it, the cold silence after years of emotional chaos, the terrifying stillness where manipulation once thrived. It's not just a breakup, it's a battlefield where identity is won or lost. Most don't realize it, but walking away from a narcissist isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning of something far more dangerous and beautiful. Because the moment she stops chasing, something strange happens. The mask slips, the illusion cracks, and suddenly, he's not powerful, he's exposed. And she's forced to confront a question more terrifying than losing him. Who am I now without the chase? Hold on, because this isn't a fairy tale of healing wrapped in soft music and candlelight. It's a brutal rebirth, a war of the soul, and yes, it's laced with unexpected laughter, brutal truth, and the kind of decisions that will either break her or build a woman no one can ever manipulate again. When a woman finally stops chasing a narcissist, the entire dynamic between them shatters, and the first casualty is the narcissist's control. You see, narcissists thrive on attention. They feed off validation like it's oxygen, and when a woman is constantly seeking their approval, running after their love, trying to fix what keeps breaking, they are in complete command. They get to decide when to give affection and when to withhold it. They get to dictate the emotional temperature of the relationship. They become the puppet master, and she, unknowingly, becomes entangled in their web of emotional manipulation. But the moment she stops, truly stops, that web begins to fall apart. The narcissist isn't ready for silence. They're not prepared for disinterest. They're used to being chased, admired, worshipped even, and when that cycle is interrupted, panic begins to set in. At first, they might pretend not to notice. They'll play it cool, maybe even act like they were planning to leave first. But beneath the surface, there's a quiet desperation. Why? Because the one thing a narcissist fears more than being hated is being irrelevant. And when a woman stops chasing, she becomes unpredictable. And that unpredictability threatens the narcissist's illusion of control. They begin to scramble. This is when you see the narcissist switch tactics. Suddenly, they're nice again, charming, attentive, just like in the beginning. They might send messages filled with nostalgia or show up unexpectedly with apologies that sound real enough to believe. But none of it is about love. It's about power. The narcissist doesn't miss her. They miss the supply. They miss the energy they extracted from her constant effort, her emotional reactions, her pain, her hope. It was never about connection. It was about domination masked as romance. And now, with her silence echoing louder than her words ever did, the narcissist is left grasping at shadows. This moment, the withdrawal of attention, is where the narcissist's grip weakens. Their manipulative strategies, once so effective, begin to lose their magic. The guilt trips, the gaslighting, the breadcrumbing, they all start falling flat. They test the waters, but nothing works like it used to. The emotional leash they once held so tightly begins to slip through their fingers. And in this unsettling shift, something remarkable starts happening. The narcissist begins to reveal who they truly are. Not the charming, misunderstood soul they pretend to be, but the insecure, emotionally hollow person who cannot function without control over others. Now they may lash out. They may accuse her of being selfish, cold, or ungrateful. They may even try to replace her quickly, parading someone else around to provoke jealousy and prove they still have power. But here's the truth. They're not replacing her. They're scrambling to recreate the feeling of dominance they lost. Their identity isn't rooted in love. It's rooted in control. And without her to control, they begin to feel exposed, vulnerable, and deeply afraid. Because in her detachment, she has done something they never expected. She has reclaimed her agency. This is not a calm, quiet process. It's messy, emotionally volatile, and often frightening. For a long time, she may have felt like she needed him to feel complete. She may have thought his love, no matter how unpredictable or cruel, was better than being alone. And that belief kept her tethered to a reality that wasn't real. But when she walks away, when she stops responding to manipulation with attention, when she chooses herself over the cycle, she breaks the narcissist's emotional economy. She refuses to pay the price of her sanity for the illusion of love. And what makes this shift even more powerful is that the narcissist cannot do anything about it. They can scream, they can lie, they can beg or accuse, but none of it restores their control. The illusion of superiority crumbles. The narrative that she was lucky to have them begins to look absurd. Without her participation, their ego has nothing to bounce off. They are left talking to a mirror, one that reflects their hollowness with uncomfortable clarity. It's like a magician who lost his audience. The tricks no longer matter. When a woman stops chasing, she forces the narcissist to face something they avoid at all costs: themselves. Without someone else to blame, belittle, or control, their internal chaos becomes harder to suppress. Their carefully crafted persona begins to rot under the weight of exposure. And though they may attempt to regain control through threats, charm, or drama, their reign is over the moment she chooses to no longer respond. Not with anger, not with sadness, just silence. When a woman walks away from chasing a narcissist, something profound begins to unfold. She starts to rediscover who she truly is. After months or even years of being emotionally entangled in someone else's chaos, her own reflection may have become unfamiliar. She's spent so long contorting herself to fit into someone else's mold, questioning her feelings, doubting her instincts, and silencing her voice, that the concept of self-worth may feel foreign. But in the quiet that follows her decision to stop chasing, there's space, a rare and powerful silence that allows the truth to surface. She was never the problem. The problem was how small she had to become to be loved by someone incapable of real love. At first, this rediscovery doesn't feel empowering. It feels terrifying. When your world has revolved around someone else's moods, needs, and manipulations, freedom can feel like chaos. There's no one to text in the middle of the night. No emotional roller coaster to distract from your thoughts. The silence can feel deafening, even cruel. But it is within that silence that her healing begins. Slowly, she starts to reclaim the pieces of herself that were buried under the weight of the narcissist's control. Pieces that once held dreams, laughter, creativity, strength. The woman who used to light up a room, the one who had opinions without apology, who laughed freely, who trusted herself. That woman isn't gone. She's been waiting quietly for permission to return. This journey back to the self is not linear. Some days she feels empowered, like she's finally seeing clearly. Other days, the fog creeps back in and whispers lies. Maybe it was your fault. Maybe you weren't enough. Maybe no one else will love you like he did. But with every step she takes in the direction of herself, those lies lose their grip. She starts to examine the things she was once told were flaws. Her sensitivity, her independence, her strength, her desire for emotional depth, these weren't weaknesses. They were threats to someone who needed to diminish her to feel powerful. And now she's beginning to see them as sacred, as evidence that she has always been more than enough. She might begin doing small things again just for herself. Reading books she used to love, spending time with friends without feeling guilty, pursuing hobbies she abandoned to keep the peace in the relationship. These aren't just acts of distraction. They're radical declarations of identity. Every choice she makes that centers her own well-being is a brick in the foundation of her reclaimed self-worth. She starts asking questions she hadn't dared to before. What do I want? What brings me joy? What kind of life do I want to build now that I'm no longer trying to survive in someone else's storm? What's powerful, and often unexpected, is how the rediscovery of self transforms not only her emotional world, but her physical and spiritual world as well. Her posture changes, her voice gains strength, her energy shifts. There's a light returning to her eyes, one that the narcissist worked so hard to dim. And as she gets stronger, she begins to notice things she once ignored, the red flags she dismissed, the ways she betrayed her own boundaries to keep the peace, the parts of herself she silenced to be loved. And instead of feeling shame for those things, she starts to feel compassion because she realizes she wasn't weak. She was human, hopeful, loving, and doing her best in a toxic situation. This compassion turns into wisdom. She begins to recognize the difference between real love and manipulation, between validation and control, between presence and performance. She no longer confuses intensity with intimacy, chaos with passion, silence with punishment. Her standards shift. She no longer feels the need to earn affection or prove her worth. She knows now that real love doesn't require self-abandonment. It doesn't shrink her. It sees her. It honors her. It grows with her. And this is perhaps the most profound part of her transformation. She no longer fears being alone. What once felt like emptiness now feels like sovereignty. She realizes that her value doesn't come from being chosen by someone else. It comes from choosing herself over and over again. And in choosing herself, she breaks the cycle. She no longer feels compelled to chase people who cannot love her. She no longer tolerates being made small. She no longer mistakes pain for love. What once felt like loss now feels like liberation. And in that freedom, she finally begins to become the woman she was always meant to be. When a woman stops chasing a narcissist, one of the most unexpected yet powerful transformations she experiences is the emergence of emotional clarity. For so long, her mind and heart were caught in a whirlwind of contradiction. One day she was adored, the next discarded. One moment she was everything, the next invisible. She walked on eggshells, second-guessing her every word, every reaction, every emotion. Was she overreacting? Was she too sensitive? Had she done something wrong again? The constant emotional whiplash became a prison, and confusion was the only language spoken in that relationship. But when the chase ends, when the cycle is broken, a strange thing happens. Her emotions begin to make sense. In the beginning, the clarity doesn't come all at once. There's a fog, a kind of emotional withdrawal, as if her heart is detoxing from the chaos it had become addicted to. She starts asking herself questions she hadn't dared to face while she was in the thick of it. Why did I stay so long? Why did I believe him every time he lied? Why did I feel like I was losing my mind? And slowly, answers begin to rise, not from a place of blame, but from a place of insight. She begins to understand that the confusion wasn't a coincidence. It was a tactic. The narcissist needed her disoriented because clarity is the enemy of control. This realization hits hard. Every contradiction, every manipulation, every twisted version of reality wasn't random. It was deliberate. Gaslighting wasn't just a buzzword, it was her daily reality. Being told she was imagining things, overthinking, or making a big deal out of nothing kept her in a state of emotional paralysis. She had to question herself so often that she eventually stopped trusting her own intuition, and that is where the damage was deepest. But now, free from that constant psychological warfare, she begins to hear her inner voice again. It's faint at first, but it's real, and it's angry, sad, strong, and wise all at once. As she sifts through the memories, things that once made no sense start falling into place. That sudden coldness after moments of intimacy, the subtle jabs disguised as jokes, the way he made her feel guilty for expressing needs, these were not signs of her being difficult. They were signs of emotional manipulation. She realizes that the chaos wasn't her fault. It was a carefully maintained system designed to make her dependent. And with that understanding, the fog begins to lift. Clarity is no longer something she has to fight for. It becomes a gift she's finally able to receive. This clarity doesn't just help her understand the narcissist, it helps her understand herself. She begins to see how her empathy was exploited, how her willingness to forgive became a weapon used against her, how her desire for connection made her vulnerable to someone who only knew how to consume, not contribute. And as painful as those realizations are, they bring something precious with them: boundaries. For the first time in a long time, she begins to define what she will and will not accept. She starts listening to her gut. She starts trusting her emotional reactions instead of silencing them. With emotional clarity comes emotional sobriety. She no longer rides the highs and lows of love bombing followed by silent treatment. She doesn't wait for the unpredictable moments of affection that used to feel like water in the desert. Instead, she starts choosing peace over passion, truth over intensity, calm over chaos. It's not that she doesn't feel anymore. It's that she finally feels in alignment with reality. Her feelings are no longer manipulated. They are hers, clean and unfiltered. And that shift is profound. There's also a strange kind of grief that comes with clarity. She mourns the time lost, the pieces of herself she gave away, the fantasies she clung to, but that grief is pure. It isn't tainted with shame or confusion. It has weight, but not poison. And through that mourning, she finds freedom. She no longer feels pulled back into the cycle. The narcissist's tricks don't work anymore because the spell is broken. She sees clearly now, and once you see, you cannot unsee. The illusions that held her in place dissolve, and what remains is truth, the kind that anchors, the kind that heals. And perhaps most powerfully, emotional clarity gives her the ability to name things. What once felt like vague discomfort now has words: manipulation, gaslighting, love bombing, trauma bonding. Naming the abuse doesn't make her a victim. It makes her conscious. It allows her to reclaim her narrative. She's not crazy, not too emotional, not broken. She was caught in a toxic system, and now she's awake. That awareness gives her strength she never knew she had. She doesn't need to argue, defend, or explain anymore. She simply sees things as they are, and that vision becomes her shield. When a woman stops chasing a narcissist, when she finally stops explaining, justifying, crying, pleading, or trying to be heard, when she becomes silent, that silence becomes deafening. To a narcissist who feeds on reaction, attention, and emotional chaos, her stillness is more terrifying than any scream. It's not just the absence of sound, it's the absence of control. Her silence doesn't mean she's weak or defeated. It means she has stopped playing the game. And in a world where the narcissist survives by provoking and manipulating, her refusal to engage is the ultimate power move. In the past, every time she cried, they twisted her tears into evidence of instability. Every time she explained herself, they redefined the narrative to suit their ego. Every attempt at resolution became ammunition in a battle she never chose but was always forced to fight. So when she chooses silence, she isn't giving up. She's taking back her power. It is an intentional act, a bold declaration. She is no longer available to be manipulated, no longer available to be guilt-tripped, no longer a participant in the emotional theater designed to keep her off balance. And that silence says everything. To the narcissist, silence is dangerous. It breaks the rhythm they've orchestrated. They expect chaos, not calm. They expect her to beg for clarity, not create her own. So they try to provoke a response. They might send a message laced with guilt, a backhanded compliment, or a sudden apology. Or worse, they might start ignoring her completely in an attempt to reassert dominance. But she doesn't react. And with every moment that passes without a reply, without a tear, without a plea, her silence grows louder. It's not indifference, it's clarity. She knows that anything she says will be used against her. She knows that truth doesn't need performance. And so, she simply stops talking. This silence is not empty. It is full of meaning, intention, and strength. It is the space where healing begins. It is where she starts to listen to her own voice again. The voice that was drowned out by years of chaos. The voice that was told it was wrong, dramatic, or too sensitive. That voice is now heard in the stillness, and it is steady, calm, and wise. In her silence, she begins to rebuild. She no longer needs to convince anyone of her worth. She no longer seeks closure from someone who was never capable of giving it. She closes the chapter herself, with no loud goodbye, no grand declaration, just silence. There is immense dignity in this choice, because reacting would mean returning to the cycle. It would mean handing over her power for another round of false hope and manipulation. But her silence refuses to be baited. It is her line in the sand, and it speaks a truth the narcissist cannot tolerate. She doesn't need them anymore. Her world no longer revolves around their approval, their attention, or their validation. She has turned inward, toward herself, and that inward turn radiates outward like a shield. She is no longer accessible to those who don't value her peace. And the beauty of silence is that it cannot be twisted. Words can be spun, emotions can be mocked, but silence leaves no openings. It forces the narcissist to sit with themselves, to face the void that used to be filled with her energy. And that void is unbearable, because they don't just miss her, they miss the reflection of power they saw in her pain. Without her, they are left with their own emptiness, and that is something they have no strategy to fix. No charm, no manipulation, no control tactic can replace the silence she holds. It is impenetrable. At the same time, her silence doesn't mean she feels nothing. There are nights when the loneliness is sharp, when memories return uninvited, when the urge to speak or lash out is overwhelming. But she holds the silence not because she has nothing to say, but because she values her peace more than the illusion of resolution. She is learning that not every wound needs a witness, not every truth needs an audience. Her growth is hers alone, and she's discovering that healing isn't loud. It's quiet, intentional, and deeply rooted in self-respect. Through silence, she also begins to connect with the world in new ways. Her relationships shift. She attracts people who value presence over performance, depth over drama. Her energy changes. She walks with a calm confidence that doesn't need to prove itself. She knows what she endured, and she knows what she will never tolerate again. That inner knowing becomes a force stronger than any words she could have said. It speaks in how she carries herself, in what she no longer entertains, in the strength behind her quiet. What once was a desperate need to be understood has become a grounded understanding of herself. She no longer begs to be heard by someone who refuses to listen. She no longer tries to change someone incapable of change. Her silence, steady and unshaken, tells the story of a woman who has outgrown the need for chaos, who has reclaimed her power without having to shout.